Hey everyone, Steamboy here. A little weird being back in front of a camera. I basically phase the style out of my review videos, but that's because this isn't really a normal review. See, this is for a contest that Futuristic Lights is hosting. Basically, you can win a set of the original or special edition atoms by doing a video review of the atoms and the ions. So I figured, sure, why not? There is a problem, however, for reasons that will become clear later in this video. I no longer own a set of either of these gloves. So I can't do a regular review where I examine hardware, software, or how I feel about these lights on any objective metric. So what I do have are my memories of my time with these glove sets. And in some way, these memories are going to be more valuable for these lights than any of my usual metrics, because at this point, the atoms and the ions are legacy chips, right? They have long since passed their prime. And at this point, it doesn't really matter if I do an objective review, because people more or less already have their opinions about them, right? So what I want to do is use my personal experiences with them to do two things, right? The first is to encourage other people to make their own review videos and to let FL know what they did and didn't like about these chips or their experiences with the lights and the company. Because of the second reason. And basically, what I want to do is give FL a sense of direction as they come back into the gloving marketplace, right? Because futuristic lights have been on a hiatus for a long time. And I would say even before COVID really started, I'm sure it didn't help, but I would say they were kind of like slowing down a lot even before that. Originally, I thought they were going to close their doors, like officially like this year. And instead they're trying to come back, which I think is incredible. However, it seems like based on the few posts that they have made so far, they're currently more interested in reviving a lot of their legacy products, which to me is somewhat uninteresting. And I would much rather them take what they have learned and make something new. And I don't mind them bringing their stuff back. I'm not saying they shouldn't do that, but I'm more interested in to see if they have something new cooking. And I'm hoping that with this rather anecdotal review, it will inspire them to do just that. Because the cool thing about FL has always been that they're coming up with crazy new ideas from a tech perspective, right? And things that have permanently affected the gloving community in amazing ways. So let's talk about the atoms first, right? Now, I owned a set of special edition atoms from 2019 to about 2021. And they were my main set for a while. I chose those over the originals because they were significantly brighter, which led to them having much better colors. The overall functionality, however, was the same. The atoms were specifically known for having this great accelerometer, right? Most people would probably consider it the best accelerometer chip on the market. Of course, that is debatable. For me personally, I think the best was actually the OSM2s, but that is because that had the advantage of being UI programmable. So you could really tinker with the settings to your personal taste. But I would say even then, the atoms are a super solid, probably super close second place, because they are still a single button programmable. And still, it had this incredibly smooth accelerometer feel. And it was a lot better than some of the other stuff out there, especially the Amazing Lights Elements or Spectras, which to me always felt too inconsistent among individual chips and felt too loose. Like there was always like a noticeable lag between thresholds and stuff. And another thing for me that I remember was that it had one of the best default modes in the history of gloving. There was this geo mode that used, I think, red, blue, and white. And the different ways it blended together, the different colors, add different axes. And it really made certain tech positions really sharp and really made really snappy feels when you're moving from one motion threshold to the next when you're using whips and flails. And it overall felt really nice. And, not to mention the chip to chip, right? Probably the best chip to chip that I've ever seen on a microlight, period. Which leads me to my first story, right? So a couple years back, I met Christian Lim, aka Limit. Uh, Kind of purely on happenstance, right? He told me that he was going to be in Washington, D.C., which is only about an hour away from me, for this anime convention called Katsucon. And I was originally only going to hang out with him for the night before the con. He asked me if I want to do a little project video with him, and I said sure. So we spent all of that Thursday night until like 3 or 4 in the morning running around the Gaylord Hotel, which is a gorgeous hotel, by the way. A lot of great places to shoot video. And we made a little project video. You can watch the whole thing in the link below. And one of the things that really helped streamline this impromptu production was that we both had the atoms. And one of us made a set that was going to be easy to pick up on camera, and immediately we just gave it to the other person, right? And I had such a good time with this person, who in the past I kind of knew casually from online videos, and we were kind of like in adjacent social circles, right? But I had such a good time with this person that I ended up buying a badge and hanging out with him every night at the con for that entire weekend. And the other thing too was that I brought my girlfriend, right? And she had a wonderful time, and she had such an amazing time that now it's something we do together, right? See, my girlfriend is not a huge fan of bass music. So in the past, it kind of made inviting her to certain events difficult. And, I'm not really one to force anyone to do anything or get into anything. Like, if you don't like something, you're just not going to like it. But she found that she really loves anime conventions. And because of this experience, now we have something like raves and festivals that are much more in line with our collective interests that we can both do together. And the reason I'm telling this story is because it's the theme I really want to drive home with this video, which is connections, right? The atoms contributed to a connection between myself and a fellow artist in this community, where we both walked away with a connection that, for me personally, because of this connection, I now live a more fulfilling life, a more connected life with my girlfriend. This one little glove set had helped set off a small cascade of little things that ultimately made my life better, right? Right, so if that's the case, why in 2021 did I give up this set? Around this time, I had received my set of vortexes, and I had kind of shelved my atoms, and I told myself I'll get back to it at some point, but right now I really want to spend some time with the vortexes. And one night, a friend of mine messages me and says, "Hey, I lost my atoms. I'm leaving on a flight to Colombia tomorrow, and I really want to share light shows with people there. Is there any chance I can buy your atoms off of you?" And I thought about it. And on the one hand, I really didn't want to let the set go. At that point, it was still my best set for accelerometers, and letting it go would put a serious hole in my gloving collection. On the other hand, I knew this friend, and at the time, he really loved his atoms, and losing them was an even bigger deal for him than it ever would have been for me. In fact, I know this because when he came back from that trip, he bought 2 more sets secondhand. He just did this as a precaution so that he would never be without his favorite set ever again. And again, I go back to connections. Because of this connection, he got to have his favorite set again, a set that he lost and thought he would not be able to find again because SE atoms were always kind of coming and going in terms of availability, right? So he had his favorite set again. And for me, I was able to sell it to him at a reasonable price, and I ended up being able to get 2 more film lights that I still use to this day for a lot of my videos, right? And do I miss that set? Of course I do. I actually think about it a lot whenever I have discussions with people about their collections and trades that people have made that they regret. We all have something that we have traded and regret letting go of, especially in this community. But for me, when I talk about that, I talk about it more as a longing and not as regret, because I know for my friend, that set meant so much more to him than it ever would have for me, and I'm happy with the way things went. Which leads me to my last story. And this is where I talk about the ions, right? The ions in comparison are a lot simpler than the atoms, and they're designed for beginners to enthusiasts, right? The main feature for the ions is the randomizer. And from my memory, the randomizer is pretty good. That said, I can't really give as detailed of an account because I've had 3 sets of ions in my possession, and every time I've had them, I gave them away. And the first time I did this was at a local music festival, Nightmare Fest, and I did this in 2018. My friend had an FL booth set up, and they were selling ions, and I decided to support my friends and buy a set. And the next night, I got a show from an orbiter, and keep in mind, this is the first festival that I had gotten proper orbit light shows. And because before that, I thought they were neat, but I never imagined some of the crazy stuff that orbiters were kind of coming up with in the past couple of years that were kind of just outside my periphery, right? And whoever this guy was, I don't know who, gave me an incredible show. And, after we trade, we get to talking and we're kind of just like chatting. And he tells me that he wants to get into gloving. He just doesn't have the money at the moment. So I just so happen to have a set of ions and I gave it to him. And over the years, whenever I have some spare cash, I buy a set of ions so that if there's a gloving session and there's a new glover with like a pre-wired set, or someone wants to try gloving, they can borrow my ions. And if I think there's a future where this person can really get into this hobby, I just give them the set. They're also really great birthday gifts for people who are thinking about getting into gloving, right? So I can honestly say that the ions are the best set that I have never actually used. And it's because so many people fall in love with them. And after I let them borrow them or keep them, they just love them. And again, it goes back to connections, right? Connections, because there are people in this community who still love these lights and love this brand. And I've waited patiently for Futuristic lights to come back. And I'm glad I was wrong. I am glad that they're trying to stay and do some cool stuff. And there are some people who say, that lights don't matter, right? Like, you could be a great glover no matter what set you use. All you need is a strobe or strobe and a couple of colors. And I agree to a point, right? I see where they're coming from. I understand the sentiments, but I think it's also disingenuous to believe that a part of the appeal of this hobby isn't because of the lights, right? Technology, collectability, customization. These are added layers brought by the microlights that make this hobby even more enjoyable. And I would be lying if I said it didn't make the hobby more appealing to me personally. And for Futuristic lights, their innovations are things that have continued to excite and reinvigorate the community by making us reconsider what should be the standard for our technology. For example, I said that the OSM2 had the best accelerometer in a microlight, and I stand by that. But would we have had them in the OSM2 if it weren't for the original kinetic set? And I feel the same way about the randomizer, right? I've never used it really for FL chips, but I have the duos now. And for that light, it's my favorite feature. Would we have had it on the duos if it weren't for the ions? And for the Aethers, would we have chip to chip if it weren't for the Aethers? So do I agree with that sentiment that the glove set doesn't matter at the end of the day? No, not really, because even more than the technology to me are the connections. And because of these lights, they drew me into this hobby. The lights were mesmerizing for long enough to help me stay and build friendships and connections. For some, this light that draws them in is only mesmerizing for a while, right? I've made a lot of friends in this community who one day packed up their bags and said, that's enough. I'm moving on from gloving. And, it's sad to see people go, but I get it. There's a lot of other stuff out there, and life can get busy and people have priorities. One of my best friends that I've made in this community, one of my first friends I've made, in fact, through gloving, packed it in a long time ago. But we're still best friends. And in fact, I'm going to a D&D convention with him in February, and it's going to be a whole weekend of nerding out together. It's going to be great. I don't think he'll ever get back into gloving, not in the way he used to. But I think every once in a while, he's just going to get the itch. And after all, just because he gave up gloving really as a mainstay of his life, it doesn't mean he gave up on the friends he made in this community. In fact, it doesn't even mean that he gave up gloving whole cloth, And I'm sure at some point I'll host a little gathering for glovers in my local community. And, he'll always have a place to stay when I do. And knowing him, there's a chance that he won't have a glove set to use. So, he'll be more than welcome to borrow mine. And on the rare chance that he tells me, hey, maybe I can get back into this, maybe he'll ask me who's still selling lights that I can recommend. And I hope that if that day ever comes, there is a brand new FL glove set that I can recommend him. Thanks for watching.